as much as Chip Kelly's a punchline, everybody runs what the Eagles did back then now. Everybody spreads the field. Everybody uses tempo. Now they use it more judiciously, and they use it in the structure of more situational football. But everybody uses a lot of his philosophies.
You're listening to the JAKIB Media Sports Network in partnership with AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Subscribe to the JAKIB Media channel on YouTube for access to all daily sports content.
All right, welcome back. You heard the man, by the way. Subscribe to the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, JAKIB Media, for all of our content, all of John's appearances on this show, and the many other shows that John appears on and even hosts. So it's time for your football fix. Here we are on a Friday, and we have John a couple minutes early. So lucky you. We're going to have some bonus coverage here tonight with John and I. John, how we doing?
I'm doing well. I'm a little fired up over this Josh McCown news.
Man, I'm gonna peel the curtain back a little bit. John texted me earlier today. And whenever I get a text like this from John, it gets me really fired up. He says, we have to talk Josh McCown. I have a lot to say. So when John goes out of his way to make sure we cover something, get your popcorn ready. So, John, I'll let you kind of take the wheel and we'll just talk about it. But fill us in on Josh McCown, and then more importantly, fill us in on your opinion on it all.
Well, Josh McCown got interviewed to be the head coach for the Houston Texans, and everybody in this industry is losing their minds, which, is kind of, I've been writing about this for going back 2 years when he's with the Eagles, and it really started with the New York Jets before that one. You sort of heard around the league that this guy was going to be a future head coach, and there's no question about it. And when he was here, the Eagles interviewed him to be on the coaching staff. And I wrote at the time that this was when they were moving on from Mike Rowe, obviously, after the Seattle playoff loss, and they had an opening at offensive coordinator. And look, Josh has made a lot of money. He's played for 17 years in this league. So he's not going to come on board as a quality control coach making $40,000 a year. So I said, if you want to make it hard for him, offer him that offensive coordinator job and see what he does. And obviously the Eagles didn't go in that direction. They weren't prepared to do it. Ultimately, they brought him back. He wanted to keep playing. They brought him back as the sort of COVID-19 quarterback, and he got to stay in Texas in quarantine in case they needed an emergency. And all of a sudden, the Houston Texans came calling, and I wrote about this in Philly Boys. They signed him to be a backup quarterback, obviously, but they also signed him to get him into the building for this reason. They want him on the coaching staff. Now, I've always used Derek Fisher in the NBA as an example. The NBA is not the same, but I got the same backlash when Derek Fisher went straight off the floor and became the head coach of the New York Knicks, and people were going, how could you do that? He's got no experience. Even though he played 18 stinking years in the league, and that's where I go with Josh McCown. What do you think? He's spent 18 years in this league, and he's been the ultimate journeyman, by the way. He's played in every single offensive scheme with every coach you could possibly imagine. There's nobody more well-liked in this league. I often talk about the disconnect of Carson Wentz in the Eagles locker room, and I constantly say to you, Ryan, I say, it's natural. If you put 70 people together, somebody's not going to like you. That's not true with Josh. That is legitimately not true.
Yeah.
There is nobody in this league that will say a bad word about him. And you saw tonight when these idiots got on Twitter and said, Josh McCown is great, but Josh McCown is going to be a great head. But, and it kills me because a lot of these people, and I don't want to single out different, but a lot of these people they're going to kill, insert coach's name. It's usually a defensive coach. So they're going to kill, say, Mike Zimmer for not going on 4th and 1 from the 49. He's so backward. And then when there's real innovation,
right,
and somebody's saying, you know what? This guy was playing in the NFL when Sean McVay was 16 years old. This guy was in the NFL for a decade. For a decade, Ryan, when Brandon Staley was a grad assistant at Tennessee. And oh, by the way, Nick Sirianni, your new head coach, he was playing in the league 7 years, and he was coaching D-backs at Mount Union. And you're going to tell me this guy isn't ready to be a head coach in this league because there's got to be some kind of box, and he's got to be and he's got to go through the process of being a quality control coach? He's better than that. That's the point.
Right.
And everybody in this league knows he's going to be a head coach. So why not get on the ground floor if you really want to be innovative and you really want to be outside of the box? And then the second part is you have all these stupid organizations, and we talked about it with the Eagles. And, going with the male model, the Beverly Hills 90210 look-alike. And they get all these criticisms for not hiring minority candidates, and then there's one job left. And Josh McCown, of all people, who there isn't a teammate he's ever had, and he's played on 100 different teams, whether they're black, white, whatever, every single one of them loves him. And you're going to use this guy and say he can't get a job because Eric Bieniemy didn't get a job. Look, I think Eric Bieniemy should be a head coach in this league. But that's in front of the Brandon Staley's of the world and the Nick Sirianni's of the world, not Josh McCown. So there's my rant.
Man, I love it. I absolutely Let me give you a slow clap. And, dude, here's the – man, there's so much to respond with. But, all right, you say, look at all these people who are commenting and tweeting. He can't be a head coach, however they phrase it. They're idiots. Like, they're trying to say this is innovative, pointing to something else, because that's just what they've seen. Like, and that's –
exactly.
And that ties in –
and that's
right.
The ironic part about it. The minute
right.
somebody really goes out on the limb, oh, you can't do that. It's hilarious to me. And the minute everyone tells them you shouldn't go for 4th and 1 at the 49, they'll say, oh, yeah, okay. Look, when everybody is doing something, it's not innovative. I got news for you. Then you're just part of the crowd. Then it becomes who does it best.
Exactly.
The Eagles had a chance. And by the way, people act like, because I got killed on Twitter and people are acting like I don't care who hires anybody. Doesn't matter to me. My job doesn't change. I got to cover whoever the Eagles hire. I could care less who they hire. But these were NFL things. I didn't tell the Eagles to talk to them about a coaching position. That's what they think of them. That's what New York Jets executives said about him. That's what Houston, that's partially why they brought him down. These are people in the league. These are every single coach he's ever had has said this guy. And I got coaches on Twitter saying to me, that's not coaching. Well, why do NFL coaches say this guy's going to be a future head coach?
Right.
Explain that to me.
That's like...
Obviously, it's not coaching, but you can project as far as the old cliche leader of men. He gets along with everybody. I don't know what else you want. I mean, he's even got the hair. He's even got the square jawline. I mean, this guy's probably had a bad day in his life. I assume he's human.
I don't know. He looks like Thor. He might not have had a bad day.
exactly. But I'm saying, and every single person did the same thing that criticized the Houston Texans today. Every single one of them said in the league, and people who know Josh, I'm not talking about fans, but people in the industry, whether they're reporters or former executives who know Josh McCown, say, he's great, unbelievable teammate, tremendous leader, but, and I'm like, man, you guys just don't get it. And it's really different. And by the way, he's not going to get the job because of these reasons. The optics are just too bad. And we talked about it with the Eagles. They shouldn't pay for the sins of, the Atlanta Falcons and anybody else and the LA Chargers and anybody else you want to blame for not hiring Eric Bieniemy. Same thing here with the Houston Texans. They shouldn't have to shoulder the burden of what certain analysts want to happen. And certainly Josh McCown shouldn't shoulder the burden of the fact that, somebody should have a job. And the act of assuming, and we also have this angle, assuming it's privilege that it would never happen to anybody else. Well, yeah, it wouldn't. You're right. This is the first time it's ever happened. And guess what? I'm not going to say it's the last time because you never say never, but it's going to be the last time for a really, really, really long time. Because that's the exact point. There are not a lot of people like this that come along in this league where you say, okay, that guy's ready right now. Doesn't happen. This is number one. So it's not like this has happened over and over again, and people are saying, "Oh, Drew Brees is retiring. Let's interview him. Phillip Rivers is retiring. Let's interview him." No, this is it. This guy, because people in the league think of him as that future coach, and I love it. I've been talking about it for 3 years. I'm amazed somebody did it, and I'm thrilled that somebody did it. To be honest, I think it's awesome. I think it's legitimate, innovative thought.
You look at, and you can tie this in a little bit, or I'll tie it in at least, to the Eagles hire of Nick Sirianni. And I said this in my reaction, and I'm reacting now every night to our conversations at 11, John. And I said, listen, Nick Sirianni, and I basically took this from you. I just agree with you. He could turn out to be an excellent head coach. He could turn out to be
great.
Right. He could be the best of all time. Great. That doesn't mean that the hire makes sense now. And we talk about innovative and taking a risk or going against the grain. And, Josh McCown, I guess he appears to be under that category, but I think you and I know that how smart he is and see that as a good hire. But I look at the Eagles hire, just to tie it together, and I jotted down a few words last night to describe it. Safe, indecisive, controlling. Because at the end of the day, even if it pans out or not, this hire was a safe hire by Jeffrey Lurie and the Philadelphia Eagles, and they would never have the cojones to hire Josh McCown right now. He wouldn't.
No, he wouldn't. And it's safe from the perspective of the football side. I get what you're saying. Organizationally, they have their structure in place. They don't want to upset it. They kind of wanted Josh McDaniels, but thought he would ultimately sort of raise up against that structure. And I think, by the way, they're probably right. I don't think he would have stood for it for a long period of time. I think he would have tried to go the Chip Kelly route and try to sort of infiltrate the building, and then all of a sudden he becomes, I'm going to try to get as much power as I possibly can, because that's been Josh's history. So I kind of understand that part of it. I mean, there is the other part that we talked about with the Rooney Rule, and they've taken a lot of hits from that perspective. So from that standard, it's not safe, to go for the, 5 o'clock shadow, Sean McVay candidate. That part of it's not safe. So you can look at it either way. But yeah, there's just, I mean, and the Eagles, not because I covered it, like I said, I mean, people have a really difficult time understanding this. Like, I'm not going to, first of all, people ask, what do you put a grade on the hire? Well, that's dumb to me. There's
so
no,
dumb.
I'm not going to give Nick Sirianni a C. We'll see
Right.
if he develops into a good coach or not. I mean, that's how this works. But, people, you're advocating for this candidate. You're advocating. I don't care who they hire. My job doesn't change one iota.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's Doug Peterson, Nick Sirianni, Josh McCown, Eric Bieniemy, you name it. It doesn't matter. We're just covering the team. So that's one part of it. The second part is, this is an organization, because I'm obviously around them a lot. They strive for that tag. They want to be known as the innovative organization. They want to be known as on the forefront of analytics. Joe Banner hasn't been here since when? He can't stop talking about it. We were the first with analytics. He can't stop talking about it. They love it. They crave it. It's their drug. And they're not innovative at all. And they can't stand when I say that. And they're not. They're just like everybody else. And that's by the way, of all the bad things you can say about the Eagles, that's the worst thing you can say about them, because they hate that.
Well, and it's even if they didn't hate it, I would say that's the worst thing you could say about an organization right now. Would that be fair? Lacking innovation? I mean, it's up there.
I don't even think it's a bad thing to say. I just think it's a realistic thing to say. I find it kind of laughable that any sports organization would call themselves innovative. Occasionally, there are years where you're like ahead of the curve.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Eagles, for instance, were ahead of the curve when they hired Chip Kelly. But Chip didn't have a dampener, so to speak. Like, he was ahead of the curve on tempo. You can go back to his first game. Everybody remembers that.
Yeah.
And the Eagles did kind of catch the NFL by surprise, but people catch up really quickly. And, he didn't adjust to the adjustments. And it essentially was, just a sparkler fizzling out really quick. But they were innovative for a very short period of time. And then, look at the league now. I mean, for as much as Chip Kelly's a punchline, everybody runs what the Eagles did back then now. Everybody spreads the field. Everybody uses tempo. Now, they use it more judiciously, and they use it in the structure of more situational football. But everybody uses a lot of his philosophies. And that's how quickly it turns. Baseball's a better example because, you have the movie. Everybody knows Moneyball. Howie Roseman's still talking about it. When he asked him about Zach Ertz, he brings up Moneyball. And, the Oakland A's were ahead of the curve with Billy Beane. And they were legitimately innovative. And they were able to win a lot of games with what people looked at from the outside looking in as, average talent to below average talent, because they were focusing on things other teams weren't. Well, now everybody does the exact same thing. So it's no longer innovative. It's just the way the game is played. Everybody does the same thing. So now, if somebody goes back to the old way, or if somebody goes back to it, then they become the innovative ones. So that's what, I get a kick out of it. If you go on football Twitter, for instance, there is a what I like to call them a sort of a group that mocks anybody who likes to run the football. And by the way, they're right. I mean, you can't
I don't think they're right.
win. Well, you can't win in the modern NFL by running the foot, just running, having a run for it. You can't do it because everybody plays the same way, and because everything is geared towards the passing game. You look at, hey, we're on championship weekend. What do the Packers do well? What does Tampa do well?
Yeah, they run.
What does Buffalo
throw it.
do well?
Yeah.
What does Kansas City do well? These are literally the top four. It's very rare that
Well,
happens.
what about and I don't completely disagree with you, but I think this is interesting from the listener standpoint. What about Tennessee and Baltimore? And I just want to throw in, can Vrabel be able to coach a team that doesn't have Henry and that is pass first? Like, that's intriguing to me. Just your thoughts on all that.
Well, you can win. You can win that way, and I say this all the time. But the margin of error is so much smaller.
Right.
And I remember talking about it last year's playoffs with Kansas City against Tennessee. And it actually was borne out in the game. Tennessee got the lead, and you're saying that's how they have to play. They have to get the lead, and they have to play from the lead. But if they get behind, and if they get behind by 2 scores, they're done. They're cooked. And that's exactly what happened. It just happened. Kansas City had to come back. So everything was going well for them early, and then it falls off the rails, and they're just not capable of winning a shootout against a team that can throw the football like that. So you can have an historic running game, and you can be very, very effective. It's not to say you can't be successful, but your margin of error is always going to be smaller. And maybe the best example is not the Tennessee game. It was the Houston game before that. 95% of NFL teams, and let's be honest, 31 of 32 NFL teams are cooked when Kansas City got down by that amount.
Yep.
I forget what the exact number was. So
28-3 maybe, or 28-0?
23 or 24, yeah,
24-0.
whatever it was.
Yeah, it was a lot.
I mean, the vast majority of teams are done. By the third quarter, you knew Kansas City was winning that game. Really, by the second quarter, you knew.
Yeah.
That's how quickly.
Yep.
That's how quickly they just struck. And even in the Super Bowl itself, San Francisco played a great game. It was probably the worst game Patrick Mahomes has ever played up until about whatever it was, 8 minutes left in the game. And then it just clicked, and they were off to the races, and San Francisco got behind, and they never had a chance. It's, and it's not to say the running game isn't important at times. It is, but, a lot of people grew up on, especially in this town, on Buddy Ryan and defense, and that's not what the NFL is any longer. And by the way, you know me, Ryan. I don't like it, but I also know it's true.
Yeah.
So you can either evolve or not evolve. But if you're going to say we're going to run the football, you're not going to be tremendously successful in this league. But I got off on a tangent there. My point is that these people mock, people who say something different, and they don't realize they're all into that group hive, and they think they're innovative, and they're really just in an echo chamber. And that's what we have when we're talking about these people who are criticizing the Houston Texans for going after Josh McCown. And that's why I use those examples. If you frame it that way. And again, Staley just gets a job. He was a grad assistant in Tennessee. Well, this guy had 10 years in 7 different offenses in the NFL. What is more helpful at that stage of your life if you want to be a head coach in this league? And this isn't 10 years as any other position where you're just learning your position. Quarterback's got to know the whole offense. Quarterback's got to know everything, and especially a quarterback like Josh McCown, who does know everything and makes it his business to understand the whole offense. it's an amazing. And again, I went through it in the NBA with Derek Fisher, who was a point guard for some of the greatest teams of this generation. And people said the same thing. Well, he's got no experience. What do you want him to coach in the G League for 2 years?
Right. It's a joke.
Iowa City.
It's a joke.
As opposed to playing with the Lakers.
But it's amazing
in the NBA Finals.
It's amazing, John, that response has essentially become eliminated, but Derek Fisher had to be the brunt of it in order for change to occur as far as perception. So maybe a hire in the NFL like Josh McCown will change things for fans for football, because, I mean, you look at Steve Nash, who's now got the job. I mean, he was an assistant, so that's not apples to apples, but essentially walking into a head coach job.
It wasn't a ton of experience, yeah.
Right.
I mean,
and there wasn't a response with him like there was with Fisher.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe it does, and it is, you know, and I think when you explain it, I do think people kind of get it when you do explain it to them, like I kind of just did, and say, you know, McVay was 16 when he was in the NFL, and you start to say, oh wow, yeah, that. But you know, it's tough to overcome because, you know, that's what the NFL is. And to me, it's not as much about fans. I mean, fans can think what they want, but when you see people in the industry go, well, you have to pay your dues. Really? Why? And why aren't you paying your dues? And obviously, a lot of these people, you know, who are generally in power positions as coaches or executives, played the game. They know they paid their dues playing the game. So, you know, why is it different from somebody else who's played the game for that long at such a high level? And it's just
it's silly.
It's silly, and it's really born out of not wanting to be made fun of. Like, nobody wants to be made fun of.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when everybody gangs up against you and says, how could you do this? You know, that's a very powerful thing. And that's why I applaud the Houston Texans, who've been taking, you know, significant hits for the most part. I applaud them for doing this, because to me it makes a ton of sense to keep this guy in your building and get him on the fast track as quickly as possible. Because, as I said, I mean, everybody says he's a future head coach, and I don't know. And by the way, the last thing I'll say about this is, if you think he's a future head coach, and again, you make a lot of money in this league now, even as a backup quarterback. So Josh McCown is not hurting for money. So, you know, maybe he says, I don't want to be a quality control coach for 2 years because I don't need it. And then you lose out on somebody you think is going to be a great head coach because you're going to make him go through these hoops. For what reason?
Right.
Convention?
Perception? Like, it's ridiculous. And, you know, great stuff from you, John, as always. We still have some time. Before I ask you your thoughts and quick prediction on Sunday's, you know, championship games, what's up with this report from The Athletic, from Adam Johns, and the tweet was deleted, but he initially tweeted out today that Staley and Matt Nagy spoke about a job for Deuce on the Bears coaching staff. Then he said they haven't actually spoke, but there is legitimate interest there. What are your thoughts on that report and thoughts on Deuce potentially leaving?
Yeah, I mean, it was something we were all going to keep an eye on, because obviously he was passed over again. And, you know, at some point, I think if Deuce Staley does want to take that next step, and I do think he does, he's probably going to have to leave this organization. And so what Adam reported is that, you know, and Matt Nagy was here with him for a very short time, so they kind of know each other. You know, he's an Andy Reid guy as well. And he needs a running backs coach. So there's no question there's interest from the Bears' perspective. Now, where Adam kind of deleted it is because he said they spoke, and evidently they had not spoken yet, but everyone expects them to talk. I think the Eagles would like to keep Deuce Staley, but I think he's probably at that point where he's, sees the writing on the wall that we all see.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll stay updated and keep you all informed, obviously, with everything going on the Eagles coaching staff front and everything else in the NFL. And speaking of that, John, we only have a couple minutes left, but give me your quick thoughts and prediction on the two games on Sunday.
Well, it's interesting. Before the season, I picked Tampa Bay and Kansas City to go to the Super Bowl, and I got ripped by the guys on the middle show because I shifted to Green Bay. But, hey, man, I'm shifting to Green Bay. I mean, Green Bay is just they are set up. Obviously, Tampa going to Lambeau. It's going to be, 25 degrees. So it could be much worse, actually. It could be much worse this time of year from a temperature standpoint. It is going to snow a little bit, and obviously they're not used to playing in that kind of weather. And I mentioned people say, well, Tom played in New England for all those years, so he's used to it. But even he said his blood is kind of already thinned from being in Tampa all year.
That's what happens when you only eat strawberries.
Yeah. I just don't like that matchup for the Buccaneers. The Packers' offense is just so good, and Rodgers is playing so well. So I kind of shifted there. And then Kansas City and Buffalo, so much depends on how healthy Patrick Mahomes really is. It's pretty evident he's going to play, but he's going to have issues with the toe and this nerve injury. So we'll see how he is. If he's healthy, they're going to win. I think 26. I think his last 26 starts, Patrick Mahomes is 25-1. I believe is the number, which is the best since the 50s. They don't lose with Patrick Mahomes. So if he's healthy, it's boring. It's home team, but it's also best team.
Yeah, and just real quick, to defend your honor, John, not that you need my defense, but to get ripped from Eitan, Harry, and Barrett, the preseason predictions are absolutely idiotic. Like, that's...
Oh, sure they are.
Yeah.
It's like giving a grade to a coaching staff.
Right. It's absolutely...
But I do give my preseason predictions because you have to.
You have to, yeah.
Always expect that. But if people ask me coaching grades, I refuse to give them out.
The grade thing is, I think, the dumbest thing. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm going to give them a C-, right?
Yeah. What do I do with that? And who are you? Who are you to give grades? I mean, what is this here? It's a joke.
I'm going to grade him on a curve.
Right.
I got to give him a B+.
Yeah, he had a good press conference, so we'll give him 5 points extra credit. Come on, man. But anyway, all right, that's our rant. John, what do you have going on extending the play tomorrow at 10 right here on 1490?
Well, it's going to be all Nick Sirianni all the time. We're talking about the Eagles, the whole process they got there. We're going to have my buddy Bob Groats on from the Delco Times, and also he hosts the Pro Football Report with the legendary voice of the Eagles, Merrill Reese. So Bob's going to be back on the program.
Love it. There we go. Extending the play. If you haven't tuned in yet, do so tomorrow, every Saturday at 10 a.m., John McMullen is the host, and it's great stuff. So be sure to check that out tomorrow, 10 a.m. right here, AM 1490, extending the play. You can also follow John at JF McMullen on Twitter, PhillyVoice.com, and Sports Illustrated at SI.com. It's where you can find all of John's written work. John, I appreciate it, man. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll catch up Monday.
Thanks, Ryan. Enjoy the games, and sorry for the rant.
No, that's what we need. That's what we yearn for.
All right, thanks, Doug.
Thanks, man. All right, there he is, J-Mac. Let's get to a quick break here. Top of the hour already. When we come back, I'll react to everything John and I said, and then we have Kelly Bidlin coming up at 11:15.